was to find him or his heirs, tell them they were going to come into a bundle of money, or give up and chronicle the thoroughness of the undertaking, providing justification for turning the remaining proceeds over to the state. I always began by duplicating the efforts of earlier researchers, which involved a computer search and phone calls to the last known place of residence. Aside from confirming their records, I knew this would shake out a few facts they'd overlooked, or hadn't looked for hard enough. These fresh leads would be the ones I'd chase down first. I looked forward to the next stage, which amounted to getting in a car or an airplane and going to where my subject was seen. Then I got to knock on doors, visit bars and clubs, or churches and hospitals, putting together the links of a chain that usually ended at the home of my quarry. Since few of the people I looked for were intentionally hiding, though I once tracked down a fugitive from a nasty divorce case, good news generally followed. My client had private investigators who could have done this part of the job just as well, or better, but they were happy to let me provide a turnkey package, and I was happy for the diversion. This was not the most lucrative part of my practice, which is why it was nice to be married to an understanding woman who owned an insurance agency. I pulled my weight, contributing equally to our savings and the expenses at our home in Stamford, Connecticut, but it was clear where the latent wealth of the family resided. With 28 employees and established relationships with sturdy carriers, her company churned out enough revenue to assure a reasonably affluent life for as long as we wanted, which, as far as I could tell, would be a long time. That's because Florenzia also loved her work. She'd say the only people who thought insurance was boring were people who weren't in the insurance business. She claimed those in the know understood they dealt in life and death, safety and disaster, hopes, dreams, triumph and disappointment were their stock in trade. She believed the reason people in her line of work seem reserved isn't because they lack feeling. Rather, they were so exposed to daily triumphs and tragedies that they had to protect themselves or risk collapsing under the weight of the emotional freight. I'd done a fair amount of research for insurance companies so I could see her point, even though I could never match her passion for underwriting, claims adjustment, loss ratios, and actuarial tables. Few could. That day I worked until 3:30, when despite a sandwich and cereal snacking, hunger began to interfere with my concentration, as it always did. The choice was to either munch on more empty calories, like a toasted bagel or handful of potato chips, or capitulate completely and have a mid-afternoon lunch, usually the more wholesome decision in the end. So I dug a wad of Florenzia's homemade chicken salad out of a big plastic container and stuffed it between a toasted buttered bagel with lettuce and tomato, a concession to both nutrition and indulgence. When I got back to my desk, I was sated, but not happily so. The meal resisted digestion, so that 2 hours later it felt like a ball of unreconstructed protein and triglycerides sitting like a brick in my stomach. This forced me out of my chair for a walk to the post office, which was about a mile from our house. A walk long enough to create the illusion that I was metabolizing all those useless calories. I had an uneasy relationship with my body and its most prominent feature, my bulging midriff. For health reasons, I wished for a sleeker profile, but vanity was never a motivation. I knew I wasn't an attractive person. Rippling abs wouldn't have changed that. They wouldn't have grown hair on my balding scalp or turned my fleshy features into Brad Pitt. That Florenzia, an undeniably beautiful woman, had overlooked these shortcomings was the root of my greatest surprise and delight, and gratitude. I was, however, an energetic 42-year-old man, especially when focused on the task at hand, the current quest. I could live on minimal sleep and even bypass meals. I could stride with purpose, running was always out of the question, for hours if need be. In short, in the right circumstances, I was one of the most vigorous schlumps you'd ever meet. It was in this mode that I walked briskly in the clear spring weather to the post office, where I kept a P.O. box. Much of my research involved correspondence not possible over the internet, so the oft-derided snail mail system was for me a vital resource, one called upon almost daily. Not giving up my exact location was a soft security measure. I wasn't by nature very sentimental. If my neighborhood post office was useless to me, I'd never have walked into the place again with no regrets, which would have been a shame, because I liked it there.